Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Health Matters with Laura Kopek. And today I want to talk about some of the mistakes that some of you might be making when it comes to personal weight loss strategies. Okay, so I want to start with intermittent fasting. This is something that has been trendy, but there's a couple things to think about. One, if some of your weight gain is cortisol dominance, meaning that stress is contributing to some of your weight gain, especially around the belly area and the middle, which can be cortisol. It also around the middle could be estrogen dominance. But right now, we're going to talk about cortisol. So, in relationship to intermittent fasting, if you are intermittent fasting to the point where your body interprets it as being under stress, then it's going to produce excess cortisol. So you're going to undermine your own strategy. So, something to think about is making sure that you're coming in and out of an extended intermittent fast enough to give your adrenals a break. This is especially important for women of a certain age that are losing some of their stress resiliency. So they're more vulnerable to fluctuations in their adrenal glands. Okay, I also want to talk about fueling the brain. So sometimes people are intermittent fasting and skipping breakfast and lunch. And the reason why this might not be a good idea is your brain really needs about 30% of your calories. And it likes to really do this before 11 a.m., if you will. And so if you're going right into waiting to eat before 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock, you're really not fueling your brain. And so you might be getting some results physically, but it could be at the expense of your brain. You may not even see it right away, but just remember your brain needs to eat too. And it likes to eat in the morning when you start your day. So think about that. In the morning, too, we might have a spike in cortisol. It could cause a spike in insulin. So, really, when you wake up in the morning, breakfast shouldn't be high carbs, and especially refined high carbs that are going to give you a harder time throughout the day. So, if you need a little bit of fat to keep satisfied, that's a good idea to add to your breakfast. Okay, so intermittent fasting. Some of the best positioning you can do to intermittent fasting for weight loss is your dinner. The earlier dinner is, the more it's going to be part of a digestive cycle, if you will. We're in digestion with the sun. And so from noon to two, kind of that peak of the sun is some of our top digestion time period. So being able to eat even your biggest meal at that time and then really fading into a light meal, something that will carry you through. All right, let's move into macros. Sometimes individuals may be focused on one particular macro, like a protein, things like keto come to mind, and aren't balanced enough to give the body enough energy, both mentally and physically. So if you're feeling that when you go into low carb or really ketosis, when you go into keto, if you don't feel like you have the energy or the happiness that you normally have when you're having carbs, think about a better balanced plate, if you will, so that you're getting good carbs. The darker the color, the more rich in phytonutrients, the more alkaline. That is going to be an indicator of it going to be processed much more efficiently and be nutrient dense. Ultimately, the body is craving nutrients, and it's not going to get all its nutrients from animal protein. So you have to think about, am I getting my nutrients? because that can lead to cravings too. Sometimes people don't understand why they're having cravings, and you have to look at the nutrient density of what you're eating to make sure it's nutrient dense enough to keep that part of your body satisfied, which is ultimately craving the fuel that you need. So, looking at your distribution of macros, are you getting good fat? Are you getting nutrient dense carbs? Again, the richer the color, the more nutrients are there. And for example, fruit, blueberries, blackberries going to be better for you than a banana. So something to consider there. Sweet potato, more nutrients than a white potato. So that's a way of kind of thinking about how do I want to spend my carb allowance. It's being talked about as keto green. That's something that you can think about here too. Okay, let's talk about protein. I know that there is a lot of trending information about you have to get so much protein. I heard someone say to me once, I have to get so much protein now, it feels like a second job. And I love that. I was like, that's an awesome way to describe it. I think part of what we get locked into that could be a mistake, especially for women as we get older, is that protein means animal protein. All your protein doesn't need to come from animal protein. And in fact, some women, if they're doing too much animal protein, they're actually slowing down their metabolism. So you need to think about good quality vegan sources of protein like pumpkin seeds, hemp seeds, even chia seeds have a little bit of protein. So breakfast can doesn't have to be hard hitting with animal protein. It can be vegan, and you can still get the protein that you need. A quarter cup of pumpkin seeds is the equivalent of about 8, 9 grams of protein. That's a full serving of protein. So you add some hemp seeds. 2 tablespoons of hemp seed is a full serving of protein, but you can certainly do 1 tablespoon and beef up your pumpkin seeds when you add it together. Again, you can be creative. That can be a snack. Um, of course, if you have a balanced meal where you're getting all your macros, you should be able to go 4 to 5 hours between meals. That's going to give your digestion some downtime. And so that's another thing to think about as a mistake you might be making. Are you doing lots of little meals? Are you grazing? And while that might work for someone, again, we're talking about are you doing something that's undermining yourself that you think is a strategy for you? So it's about reflecting on what is going on in your routine, in your diet, and do you need to make adjustments there? Because everyone's metabolism is different because our guts are so unique. Our stress response is so unique. Our gut is as unique as a fingerprint. So, that's something to think about when you're thinking about, okay, well, this worked for this person and this worked for another. And again, as we start fluctuating hormonally and as we lose some stress resiliency, as we know, the older we get, the harder it is to lose weight. So we want to think about do we need to make adjustments that kind of ride that wave for us? Hormone disrupting foods, speaking of hormones, I think a lot of, if you are fluctuating hormonally and you are trying to stay fit, you have to think about how much hormone disrupting foods you're doing. And as we get older, reconsidering whether the frequency that you're doing this at could be too much. I know that some of you might think a glass of wine, 2 glasses of wine on the weekend doesn't sound like much. But again, if you're trying to meet a metabolic goal and you're not seeing any movement, it's time to rethink whether or not some of these things are to your benefit or not. It may take too long to recover if you're doing it once a week, twice a week, and then you never really kind of get out of that cycle. So, alcohol, number one hormone disruptor, number one metabolic slowdown. Caffeine. Now, some caffeine helps a little bit with accelerating metabolism. Green tea is always going to be better than a black tea or coffee because those might be creating too much cortisol, might be creating too much histamine for you. And so, again, when we look at those hormone disrupting foods, pretty much all of them also fall under a category of high histamines. If your histamines are too high, you might be in estrogen dominance. That whole cascading effect can keep you from being as metabolically fit as you want. So, alcohol, caffeine, refined sugars, cow dairy, uh, gluten, and peanuts. And so when we talk about even weight, we could be talking about all grains, and cow dairy sometimes could extend to beef for some people. Sometimes just having cow dairy or beef is actually going to be really hard on the digestion. Dairy for sure is really hard for women to break down. And so any amount of dairy, I hear a lot of women come in and they're doing yogurt every day, thinking that it's a smart way to manage their weight or even achieve weight loss, and they don't understand why they're not losing. So you might want to take out dairy for a minimum of 30 days and see if that's one of your culprits. Um, Even if you're doing it only sporadically. One of the things I'll suggest is keep track of your food. Now, if tracking it in an app kind of stresses you out, then just write it down on a piece of paper. But you'd be surprised how often people say, "Oh, I don't really eat like that." But we do. And when we start writing it down, we start to use a different part of our brain when we're making those food selections. And so sometimes you might find that after a while, you're like, wow, look, I really need to adjust dinner, or I need to make adjustments, or I eat this particular food way more than I think I do. So write your food down. It's a really powerful tool. Also, keeping a journal of positive things, affirmations towards your goal. Scarcity thinking is a thing. And often, if we are constantly self affirming in the mirror every day, things like, I am overweight, or I can't stand looking at myself, or, you know, I'm whatever, you fill in the blank there. Um, we're affirming that and our cells are listening. And so we really have to think about, can we at least stop affirming that, right? Stop affirming the negative, because part of your body is just always going to work against you. Writing things down is a very powerful way of changing the affirmations that go on in your head. We can get fixated on things, and that is a way of really getting us stuck. And that's for a lot of things. We can resent someone, and that can ruminate, and it can get stuck in our brain, and it can keep us in a stress response. Guess what? That's going to affect our metabolism. So, really spending time not just affirming the goals that we want, but also really thinking about, do I need to unwind anything else in my brain? And do you need to work with someone on that? Stress isn't just um, feeling like I'm having a bad day at work, or I had an argument with a loved one. Stress is something that can exist in four areas: physical, mental, emotional, sensory. I talk about this a lot. I have other podcasts on stress itself. Definitely think about if your stress is something that's not mental, but even the weight itself could be causing stress in your body. And so, really working on the mental and emotional, even the unseen and unfelt, can help you really think about moving away from the stress, which can slow your metabolic fitness. Okay, let's talk about sleep as part of recovering from many things. We need to sleep. We are just not going to be metabolically fit if sleep is not a priority. We're not going to be healthy if sleep is not a priority. There's all kinds of research linking sleep to many things, including dementia. So your brain needs your sleep. Your adrenals, which manage your stress, need your sleep. And we detoxify and rejuvenate. We do so many things when we sleep. If the amount of inflammatory foods, your hormone disrupting, high histamines, if that is overflowing and there isn't enough recouping from it while you sleep, it's going to carry over into the next day. A pretty good indicator of possibly not fully detoxing. Actually, there could be three. One is you might not have a morning bowel movement. Really need to feel like you empty your pipes. Like, oh my gosh, that was like, within 1 to 2 hours of waking up. You need to be able to do that without using caffeine to induce a bowel movement. So, having a bowel movement and making sure your digestion is doing and your detox pathways are doing what they need to do. Second is if you're waking up feeling a little nauseous or even a lot nauseous, chances are that something didn't align with the food you ate the night before, the amount of recovery and detox your body needed to process some of that, or even just like not being interested in breakfast for a really long time, almost to where it's lunch. That could be an indicator that you're not fully recovering from what you're eating in terms of making the most of that detox and recovery sleep that we all need. All right, let's talk about exercise. There's definitely a sweet spot here. Work with a trainer that if you are of a certain age, work with a trainer that is of a certain age, or definitely talks about working with perimenopausal or menopausal women. And the reason is if you get into too much high intensity exercise, you're going to trigger excess cortisol. So there's a sweet spot. Certainly, sedentary is not going to give you the results that you want, but doing too much weight, placing too much pressure on your spine, you have to definitely think about, am I doing too much? Um, we often think in this culture that if something's good, then more is better. And that is not necessarily the case. Things like collagen, we can do too much of, and protein powder, we can do too much of. Those place a burden on the liver and the kidneys. Creatine, you can do too much of. Animal protein, you can do too much of. Sourdough bread is still bread. And if you do that and think that, oh, it's good, more will be better, it's not, it's still bread. So we have to think about, what we are doing that could be in excess. So excess is another mistake that we're making. Again, are you eating too much of one particular food source and not rotating it out? Are you doing too much of intermittent fasting? Are you doing too much of being in ketosis? So, really understanding where your excess might be and really kind of understanding that there could be something there that you think is good for you. But if your body is thinking that you're doing too much of it and it's in excess, again, it's not going to align with you. Some other things to think about, and these are all strategies we do here in the office. So I encourage you to come in. But do you need lymphatic drainage? Do you need to look at other accelerated ways to detoxify that are not going to put your body in a state of excess stress? So, are you looking at your hormones correctly, both in saliva and blood, so you can see anyone that doesn't have a regular menstrual cycle anymore? Or if you are not in menopause and you have an irregular one, probably need to look at your hormones a little bit differently to get that true baseline of what's happening, because some people could not realize they're in estrogen dominance because of what is happening in their blood. It looks normal. And same with testosterone. They could look low testosterone. It could be testosterone dominant. And that's a tricky place too, because your fat cells are going to trap things like estrogen and testosterone, but then also you need the testosterone to um, be more metabolically fit, more uh, burning fat and building muscle. But if that testosterone isn't working for you, it's getting trapped, then you could be in a stuck place. And so making sure your hormones are being processed, being moved correctly. Estrogen dominance, estrogen is synthesized in the gut and the liver. If there is kind of a sluggish liver, fatty liver, anything like that can be a problem. Again, if you're doing too much of something that places a burden on your liver and you're not processing your estrogen correctly, again, you can come into a roadblock of plateauing or not even losing what you want to lose. So, last thing to think about is water. Are you not only drinking enough water, but are you avoiding diuretics so that you're not peeing out more than you intake? Again, we want to make sure that histamines are not a problem, dominance in anything is not a problem, and that you're actually drinking on-bound, clean water so that you're circulating the water that is in your body. We lose about 32 ounces every day. In general, we want to kind of replace and allow for those 32 ounces to be um, excreted from the body. We do that through saliva, through sweat, through urine, through a bowel movement. So water is hugely important. It does help the um, breakdown of our fat. So those are some of the mistakes you might be making. I hope this was helpful. I hope you will come in and see us as part of a weight loss plan for yourself. And if for no other reason, listening to this and kind of rethinking and going through, going, where can I strategize on this and see if there's something I'm missing? All right. Have a great rest of your day. Good luck with your health goals and stay tuned for another episode.